It's worth hearing twice.
Sure.
All right, so, be sure to hear it after this, and also Fight Back News has an interview with her, so. It's hard to get enough of Sid, so, plenty of places. So, the, Peaceful China Committee is a new WAM committee, and we formed because of China's growing economic influence and power. Because of that, it's in the crosshairs of US imperialism and finds itself in a new US Cold War. We remember 2012 when Obama announced the pivot to Asia and initiated a series of actions to counter China's rise. By increasing US military, economic, and diplomatic cooperation with other countries in Asia, he aimed to ice out China and to bring those countries into the US sphere of economic and ideological influence. This is not US sphere. And because US foreign policy is bipartisan with some tactical differences, the screws have been tightened under the Trump, Biden, and latest Trump administrations. Militarization of the Pacific is rising and the encirclement strategy has deepened. The US has increased weapons sales to Taiwan, undermined the One China policy, encouraged Japan to rearm, deploy the THAAD anti-ballistic defense missile system in South Korea and Guam, established a US Marine base in Northern Australia. We have somebody from Australia here today. And bulked up the Indo-Pac Pacific Command. He said, the US Secretary of Defense writes and says that the Chinese are literally the villains of our generation, which if he says it, you know, it's just the opposite. And if we don't defeat them, we will be standing for the Chinese, well, if only, the Chinese national anthem someday. And then the US is in a holy war against China and socialism. Of course, that's helpful. Recently, the US funded Hudson Institute released a long Orwellian plan outlining the goal of regime change and of a gradual invasion of China. To get the US public behind this, the US propaganda machine is in full swing to demonize and vilify China. Don't you hear I make myself listen to NPR just to get the news, and at least once a week, if not, sometimes twice a day, there's a hit piece on China, right? So, then I turn to KFAI. As an anti-war movement, we have to know the truth about China in order to both counter the myths and propaganda, and in order to, most important, in order to be able to resist US attacks on China. An important way to get this information is, well, the best way, of course, is to go there. Second best is to get a first-hand report. And our speaker is Cindy Lovely, longtime activist, a member of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization Central Committee, was a part of the 2025 Friends of Socialist China. She has recently returned from a visit to the People's Republic of China. She will share her reflections on how China is building socialism, from groundbreaking achievements in poverty alleviation and environmental protection to China's role in promoting a global future built on mutual prosperity and a just peace. You can also read her, as I already said, you can read her interview in Fight Back News and hear her on Fight Back News Radio. So, without further ado, Cindy, take it away.
I am going to read from Xi Jinping, The Governance of China, Chapter 1. It'll only take like 10 hours. So. Okay. So yes, as was said, I was part of the Friends of Socialist China delegation. Friends of Socialist China brings together different groups, different authors, and that, to combat all of the, lies about China and report on the truth, right? So yes, so over the course of 10 days, and I've got some pictures too, so I'll show them too and try to make it like somewhat aligned. But over the course of 10 days, we went to 5 cities: Xi'an, Yan'an, Dunhuang, Jiayuan, and Shanghai. So I'll share some things about those But everything that we saw affirmed that China is not only continuing to build socialism, that centers the people. It proves that the future is more peaceful, more equal, and more prosperous. So, 75 years of socialist construction. China is the world's largest economy by purchasing power parity, the largest industrial manufacturing and trading economy. Absolute poverty eliminated, a life expectancy that's 2 years longer than in the U.S. And thanks to Chinese socialism, they complete what's basically an industrial revolution every decade since the 1980s. China is on the forefront of AI, quantum technology, big data, all of that. So China has really changed the world forever, but remains controversial in the West, even amongst the left. We can't believe it, but it's true. So I'm going to talk about all kinds of things, but the main principle is that we're going to, like Mao said, seek truth from facts, right? So it's worth saying that was just a video of Xi'an, the first city where we were in. It's the 10th largest city, super populous, but even traffic with all the complications just tends to flow. Yeah, you can see it kind of, right? But yeah, I'll talk about Xi'an a little bit. So it's worth saying a little bit about what China was like before the revolution. And only the Communist Party can save China. That's what Mao said, and that's what allowed the masses of people to break out of a system that was a nightmare for the vast majority of people. The countryside was being looted by elites. You had millions of deaths due to famines. It was a system of death and famines. We went to Xi'an, we saw some ancient history museums, and the noble women were all very beautiful and very chubby. And we saw the terracotta warriors and the generals were all very, very imposing and chubby because starvation was a feature of, I'm just saying, because starvation was a feature of society, right? There was a life expectancy of around 24 years in the countryside. Opium addiction was rampant. Warlords ruled, vast regions of the country. So really, it was hell. And to compare and contrast old China and new is really earth shaking. Even after the revolution, no one was dying of hunger, right? That was addressed through rationing and different things. And the end of that extreme poverty in terms of starvation was earth shaking. But as I'll talk about later, we've come so far even since then. So China was always, a neo-colony in general. And then you had the warlord period after the rule of the emperors. And the warlords were really tools of imperialism too. So all of these things go back, Tibet, Taiwan. This was British projects and U.S. projects to take China apart. So yes, I said the revolution in 1949 put an end to people starving, and they were tackling poverty in the liberated zones. But since then, there's been an unprecedented transformation in human history. And the original goal of the Chinese Communist Party to uplift the people, that remains unchanged. So Xi'an, like I said, it's important historically. It's the ancient capital of the Tang Dynasty and the end of the eastern end of the Silk Road. Let's see. There's just some pictures of the streets. And there's a movement now to kind of connect the history of the old Silk Road as a connector of civilizations with the Belt and Road Initiative today. And it's infrastructure projects and all kinds of things that are an alternative to the exploitative policies of the IMF and other Western financial institutions. So, just a little about the Belt and Road Initiative. We're over 10 years out. There's 150 countries that have signed BRI agreements. That covers 2/3 of the world's population. Central Asian countries are China's largest trading partners. And China is, executing diplomacy on an extremely wide stage. Like, it's just a contrast to some of the things you were talking about. China's foreign policy is consistently peaceful, and promoting peace all over the world. And Belt and Road has been a huge success. A lot of people didn't think that it would work, but because there's a lot of differences across. We're talking about projects in all different continents, but it's been hugely successful at the same time as changing the standards of living for the people in China, right? So, yes. At Xi'an, also, if you're a history buff, the site of the Xi'an incident where Chiang Kai-shek was captured, and they were like, "Can you kill him?" And they're like, "No, we're actually going to form a united front with a Kuomintang against Japanese imperialism." So yeah, it's a very high-tech city. It's built around people. Oh, this is the terrifying element. Let's see on as well. And the thing about a lot of things stood out, but when I said about how traffic flows, so populous, so busy, but like a mom and her kids would just like walk out into the street in front of a car because they knew the cars would stop. Like, it just works. Yeah, and that's a view from the old city wall. Oh, here's a good one. So, I'm not the best photographer, but so we asked our hosts too about homelessness and things like that. One person across like all of these regions, we saw one person who was begging on the street, and they explained how there was at the beginning of uh, the rapid development in the cities, there's a big difference between the countryside and the cities. And so you have a problem with people coming from the rural areas and going into the cities to beg, right? And there were a lot of different projects to tackle that. And we'll get into the poverty alleviation, but it was pretty remarkable to only see one. I mean, I don't know any major city where you only see one person. We went all around. Also, he had a pan with the QR code at the bottom. But they said also, like, if there is someone, then basically the police will investigate it, what happened, something went wrong, right? Did they have family members that should have taken them in? But like the city government is responsible, and so someone will get in trouble, right? So kind of unimaginable here in the States. But let's see. This is just a cute dog that was hanging out at a bar there. Also, this is the first city we went to, but already the kind of access to free activities and culture was really stood out. It was like 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, and everybody's just out. Like, there's dancing, there's merry making, and this. Then we went to Yan'an. So Yan'an, you call it the Revolutionary Cradle, and it's where the Communist Party was based from 1935 to 1948. This is the Yan'an Revolutionary Memorial Hall. It's in Shaanxi province in northern China, and it was the endpoint of the Long March. 100,000 members of the Red Army, 4 different, different parts of it, squads, not squads. You know what I mean? Battalion, yeah, so we converged there. It was a brutal journey. Um, uh, you know, and also where the CPC kind of established itself as, we're going to be a party for the masses of Chinese people. These represent the different fronts that converged there. They marched 10,000 kilometers from bases all over the South to establish that new command post there. And there's a museum there at the Memorial Hall, just about, the, they had to, form a cooperative basis of production through land and other economic reforms. They're, from 1946 to 49, we fought the Civil War against the Kuomintang, and Kuomintang had a major numerical advantage over the CPC in a lot of areas. But Mao was confident that the reactionaries are paper tigers, and they soon defeated the Kuomintang and forced a retreat to Taiwan. So yeah, that museum just showed, they made cannons out of wooden logs and wire. They would do things like I talked about how they were outnumbered. They would set off firecrackers to mimic the sound of gunfire to trick the enemy into thinking there was more forces there than there were. They established the party school there in 1943, and they established the institutions of governance, right? So including the courts, and the highest bodies, the precursor to the National People's Congress, and all the officials were elected by the masses. So people who couldn't read, they cast their votes with beads in bowls. Yeah. To pick their preferred candidates. They had the 7th National Congress here in this hall. This was 17 years after the 6th National Congress, because they were fighting. But here, the modern CPC took shape. Like I said, a party of the masses of Chinese people, fighting dogmatism. The party kind of matured, and Mao Zedong thought crystallized. So the average age of the delegates was 36 and a half. They represented all the different revolutionary bases, traveled far and wide to get here. Liu Shaoqi traveled for 9 months and crossed over 100 enemy blockades to get to the Congress. So, oh yeah, I gave an address as well. Yes, I did. Yeah. There's a lot of internal tourism to all these different sites. There's a lot of museums. It's a big deal. So this place was packed, and there was a line of people going to take a picture at the Presidium. So of course I had to get in there. Beautiful landscaping. These were the cave dwellings where Chu Te and Mao Zedong stayed during that time. That's just Chu Te's bookshelf. He said for a revolutionary to not be studying is like a blood not circulating. Food for thought. This was the table where Mao was giving an interview and first said that reactionaries are paper tigers. That's just a picture of Yan'an today. So it's a super modern city. It has various awards. Cities get awards. One of theirs was elder care initiatives. And yeah, in Yan'an, serve the people was made real. Then we went to Dunhuang. This is in the airport. You don't have to look for your flight in the ticker to get your gate information. You know how you scan your passport photo at the beginning? So you just, once you're in the airport, you stand in front of one of these screens, and it sees like everyone's faces and says like, "Hello, Sydney, your gate is over here. you know, we, at this time, here's some information, so we thought that was amazing, we took pictures of it, and everyone in the airport was laughing at us. Yeah, so this is Dunhuang, and, Dunhuang is in Gansu province. It's on the edge of the Gobi Desert, it's between Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang. We went to a seminar there, about, global civilization initiative. There was some, high-ranking officials there, also had the president of Botswana. Um, yes, this is done, it's just, they like to decorate for seminars. Oh, yeah, I'll take out that later. But, this is, when I was talking about the free access to culture, history, and activities, that was really striking there. During that seminar, it happened to be Dragon Boat Festival, which is, there's a lot of holidays, but that's a big one, and, in the places with rivers, there's big boats, the dragon boats and that, but even it's celebrated up here in the desert, and what they do is, there's 10,000 people there who go up on, climb up one side of the sand dune, and on the opposite sand dune, they project lyrics and do a sing-along. That was pretty fun. But yeah, and also everywhere, just things that we take for granted as not available, in terms of high quality infrastructure, like everywhere, there's, free public toilets, affordable transport, all kinds of family activities and that. So that's a view from the top of the dune. They project the links over there. Oh yeah. Short video. Oh, that's Jackie. There was other groups on our delegation. Jackie is, a leader in Black Alliance for Peace. We'll do some joint events with them too. Okay, then we went to another city in Gansu province, which was Jiaiyuan. And it was an industrial city built from scratch again in the desert. In the 1950s, they found, like iron ore, deposits. And so they built, Jisco, which is the largest steel company, in Northwest China. We toured here, the Dunhuang molten salt solar thermal power plant. There's green energy sites all over, China, but, this one was really, really cool. It's like, there's at the top of that tower, it's molten salt. And that holds energy for 12 hours, so they can get the sunlight in the day and, still have electricity at night because the salt holds and salt is cheap. So, it's pretty cool. This is just a coffee shop in Jiaiyuan. You could go and, they have all these stamps, that are about like, cultural artifacts. There's also, it's another, kind of ancient outpost of the Silk Road, and so a lot of different cultures, came together there. And yeah, they make that accessible for everyone. This is also a lot of cities have, just museums of how the city was formed. Like I said, the internal tourism is a big deal there. But some interesting things about Jiaiyuan is, like I said, it's in the desert, but, it's now has 42% green cover, in terms of forests and that. Apparently you could just do that. You could just, make rivers and lakes. And these are some of the workers that founded the town. Gansu province was historically amongst, China's poorest, in that region. So now it's been transformed into China's, 14th largest steel producer. And it just, everything in this city showed how strategic planning can reshape an entire region. So, and I have a little pamphlet from GISCO, which is the state-owned enterprise that does, the steel production there. But high quality development was all over, modern infrastructure, clean streets, high quality public housing. That, easily surpasses most small towns in the US. Oh, this was a backdrop because in the 50s and 60s, the people in Jiayuan wanted to pretend that they had been to Beijing. So they had a backdrop of Tiananmen Square, and they would take pictures of him and send that. So it's the original Photoshop, and just some exhibits of what their homes looked like across the decades. Awards of, like I said, towns just get awards, so these are theirs. City of Fine Sanitation. Oh, that's yeah, that's a view of this is an old photo, it's from the early 2000s. And map of this city. Yeah, it lights up. This is about how they achieved the green cover there in the desert. And they also have an AI smart grid and localized energy consumption project in Jiayuan developed by GISCO to manage energy distribution throughout the region. China is the only renewable energy superpower in the world. They're responsible for 60% of all wind and solar production in the world. And that's from 15, 20 years ago, right? 98% of all the world's electric buses are made in China. 70% of high-speed rail in the world is in China. 2/3 of electric vehicles are in China, and they're a world leader in biodiversity and forestation as well. So we visited the power grid just to see how it works, and some people were asking some technical questions about what's the difference between the technology and energy distribution here and what would be seen in cities in the US. And they translated that, and then he kind of answered, well, the difference is that ours don't go down. They have a party exhibit there. This is just a statue honoring the steel workers that built the town. And also just a testament to the level of development, GISCO started as a steel company, but now they also have a dairy farm, and they also have vineyards. They also make wine, and they have the largest indoor wine cellar in Asia. Yeah, it's very fun. Okay, now we went to Shanghai. Well, first, before that, I can just say a little bit about the poverty alleviation. I mentioned that. But this is not just China saying this. This is like the UN saying this. It's the most successful and wide-ranging poverty alleviation campaign in world history. Since 800 million people lifted from poverty in the past 40 years, and 100 million in the last 10 to 12 years. And this is only possible through millions of cadres and volunteers sent into the poorest regions in the countryside to stay there for years and work with the families, individuals, and communities that are poor, and work with them to find a route out of poverty and stay out of poverty. So by 2021, out of 1.4 billion people, there are zero living in extreme poverty. And it's the whole project. Like I said, it's millions of cadres going and living in these places to work with them. It's everything from you guys are farming this crop, we have better seeds that'll be more profitable, make this crop instead. Oh, you need a way to get to the city to sell things, we'll make a subway that goes straight from your village into the town. So, also, when we're talking about the definition of absolute poverty, it's not just about cash income. It's also, guarantees of housing, nutritious food, clothing, um, free education for at least 9 years, clean water piped into the home, and electricity piped into the home. And healthcare. If you're sick, you see a doctor. So all of that is what we mean by out of absolute poverty. Yeah. So then we went to Shanghai as well. These are just some pictures of the street there. We went to the site of the CPC's first Congress. They have a beautiful museum there. Just to say, Shanghai has a life expectancy that's higher than New York or London. Like I said, public infrastructure was just mind blowing compared to major cities here. In all of these things, the party is not following capital, it's leading it and restraining it to serve the interests of the people. That's what this is all about, is which class leads, right? There's a balance of powers. There's obviously a contradiction between rapid development and environmental protection. And so everything that the party does is to solve those and to put the people in the driver's seat of where China goes. So all of that is making the best use of what's been US dominated globalization, right? So that the Chinese people are beneficiaries of this, maximize the good and minimize the bad. And the balance is, firmly in favor of the people. So just to say a bit about the Chinese Communist Party, it's not like the parties we have here. It's not like bourgeois parties. China, through China's long history of amalgamation of all these different states, hundreds of different states into one country. Today, if you're a member of the party, it's a real meritocracy. So you actually have to prove that you can lead effectively. You can't buy your way into a position ever. And under Xi Jinping, there is an enhanced, role of party committees in the private sector too. So the private sector you can develop, but only in the interest of the people. They have to serve, the country, the state, and the people. So, the party is everywhere. It's not this like shadowy, thing. We had a bus driver that was a party member. There's party centers in cities where people can go in and, make a complaint or ask for help with something. The cadres even will watch your kids if you can't find a babysitter. So yeah, this is a robotics facility in Shanghai where they demonstrated just new technology for mostly for surgeries. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's the last picture. I'll leave it on there. Well, what's a good picture? How about this? Yeah. So I can, we can do Q&A too. But I can say a little bit more about how democracy functions and how socialist democracy functions, right? Everything is a process of improvement, and nowhere in the world can we claim perfection. But the best form of democracy aligns to the reality of a country. So in China, it's what they call whole process people's democracy. And it's aligned to Chinese society, but of course we can learn from it. And the right to vote, sure, but that's not democracy. How democracy functions is in-depth consultation before and during major decision making at every level, to take consensus as far as possible. People's demands have to be responded to. The people are at the top level of the system, and there's all kinds of channels and forms of feedback to facilitate that. And as an example, so like in a city, there's districts and there's sub-districts. So a sub-district has a legislative outreach office. And one of them in Hangzhou, there's a branch of that office which the job is to solicit people's opinions. So they'll take, tens of thousands of interviews. They call it people's concerns, opinions, wisdom, and will. Draft laws and then submit legislative proposals. One of the party members who is a community outreach officer at one of these legislative offices said, ordinary people may not be familiar with the law, but they know the truth in life and in production. So the law actually comes from daily life and work, so that legislation is accessible to them. So in China, democracy is not ornamental, it's an instrument for assessing and addressing people's needs. There's an idiom, they love idioms, but one of them is the water that keeps the ship afloat can also upset it, right? So how can a party remain in power for 70 years is democracy. There's international polls of trust, and in 2021, China hit 91% trust amongst Chinese people in their government. And that corroborates with, Harvard Kennedy School of Governments and polls and all of that. So, this is like what I talked about was decided by the CBC in Yunnan. What kind of party will we be and how will we be able to do long-term governance? And in one of those discussions, Mao said, the government will only not slack if it's subject to bottom-up scrutiny. And that manifests in the anti-corruption campaign led by Xi Jinping as well. He called it the revolution the party imposes on itself. And even what they're talking about in terms of corruption is much different than what we went to one of the seminars that had a lot of party members, and they said after these conferences, people used to drink a lot, and now there's no alcohol after conferences. So things like this, right? The people are really the masters of the country. And elections are extensive at every level. Each vote carries equal weight. And it's a consultative democracy. Another example is there's a township in Tibet called Zari Township. It's a beautiful area, but historically very poor. And so one of the leaders had a process of getting input from the villagers about the development of the town, and they had a plan to build a bunch of low-income housing, and they had a plan for like 2-room and 3-room apartments. But over the course of that consultation, they discovered that people had way more varied family arrangements, and so they pivoted and developed 6 different layouts for apartments there. Some of the channels happens online too. There's 1 billion internet users on China. And people can, throw their hat in the ring and give their suggestions. Even there was one person who, in one of these online channels, had a proposal for a mutual aid elderly care concept, and that just on one of these forums was taken up to the plenary session of the 19th CPC Central Committee. Right, so we go from putting beans into bowls to all of these online channels and party centers for people to deliver their demands to the government. What are the main concerns of the people? That's what the government is focused on. Absolute poverty, yes, that's what this whole poverty alleviation campaign was about. Now, mutual prosperity, evening out development in different areas, climate change, affordable housing. Now these things are the focus of the government, right? So, so all of this is just, how is it, possible? It's only through, through socialism and through socialist democracy, how a country that was one of the poorest in the world can industrialize and protect the environment and, uplift ethnic minorities, and stay sovereign all without war. China hasn't been at war for decades. You see back there, China, the United States has over 800 overseas bases. China has one in Djibouti to protect shipping lanes in the Indian Ocean. So yeah, it's a real place. It's not a utopia, but all these lies about China to justify Cold War, chip wars, trade wars, hot wars. The campaign of encirclement, like we talked about. Um, the world is actually moving towards more prosperity and more peace and more sustainability, and that's being led by China today. So
We have time for some questions. How do we wanna do this? We wanna, shout it out, I'll repeat it, or one of us will.
It's sort of a simple one. Where would you go to find sort of non-Western sources of information? Curious. It's a lot- What's that?
Oh, go ahead, I was just gonna repeat it, but you have.
Just a lot of it a lot of the information I see is sort of, it seems like it's syndicated. So I'd
Yeah.
like to know.
no, 100%. They publish lies. One of their favorite is Uyghur genocide, right? And it actually has become more difficult for them to point the finger about genocide when they're funding a real genocide in Gaza, right? So there's that, but also it's just, well, let me actually answer your question. But a lot of the things, in terms of news, CGTN is kind of their global news outlet for, they have CGTN America, CGTN Africa. You can't even in our international news, they don't even cover things that are happening in Africa. So I watch CGTN Africa a lot to learn about those, but even on here, there's a resource list for the history. But yeah, CGTN has a lot of content online. There's some, the problem is as soon as somebody starts saying something true about China, then they say it's propaganda or state on whatever. So there's some Americans that are on the platforms that do it, but even like Dave Long and that. But even speaking of the Uyghur narrative, Uyghurs like have phones and and internet access and VPNs. And Danny was saying like that even a lot of them are not really aware of the whole narrative about what's happening there. The main thing they know is that they're doing all of these bans on their cotton exports, which is a big industry there. So they know that, and that's hurt the economy. But the Chinese people are so patriotic that there's a whole new movement of Chinese people going to Xinjiang to buy the cotton to build the economy back up there. But yeah, like I said, it's a complete hypocrisy. A Uyghur genocide is not reality. The Uyghur population grew a quarter between 2010 and 22 because they're also the beneficiaries of all these anti poverty projects. And so then maybe they say, okay, maybe there's no genocide in Uyghur autonomous region. And it's called that because Uyghurs are the majority. There's many ethnic groups all over China. And it's really, but one of the ways that they apply the rights of national minorities is autonomous regions where, the rights to language, everything is in the Uyghur language, cultural autonomy schools and all that, with the same access to development that's across the board in China to lift up, modernize and grow. Yeah, even I've seen them say cultural genocide, they don't allow them to practice their religion. There's more mosques in Xinjiang than there are churches in the US proportional to the population, so no, it's not true, yeah.
I was wondering, when I was in undergrad, I was we would sometimes hear about sociology from different countries. We've never heard about any academics out of China or any studies going on in China or any research methods there. And it kind of got me wondering, I'm basically just curious, like, what did you see anything about like the Chinese equivalent of like New York Times bestseller list or like any like fun culture stuff that we don't hear about? Sometimes we hear about like Mexican novellas and whatnot and things going on in Europe, but we never really get cultural imports from China unless they're like video games. So I was wondering if there was any like music or books or TV shows that you heard of while you were over there that would be fun to check out.
We didn't really have time to like watch TV or anything, but when I was on the plane, I was watching the TV of the person in front of me, and there was a show. It was like a sitcom, but it was about like this bright-eyed and bushy-tailed like social worker who was assigned to go to a small town in Tibet and help them like do elections and have schools. And it was like she thought she knew everything, but she really had to learn from the people. Like, so yeah, we have a lot of stuff. I don't know how you can get it. We can probably get it, but yeah. Yeah, someone can put you off there. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's really invaluable to see the pictures and hear your stories, and so thank you for going and sharing all that. My question is a very maybe particular one, but in one of the pictures we talked a little bit about AI in China, and here in the US, like workers and a lot of people on the left are very skeptical, rightly so, about AI because it's going to take all of our fucking jobs, and can be used against the people. But in China, is there any more you could say about how they're using AI and not like to wipe out everyone's job to make life better?
Yeah. So the AI electrical grids is one example. But they use it in all kind of different ways, and that's really just a testament. Like technology itself is not evil. It's all who's using it and for what purpose. And so they use AI in agriculture a lot. To just be able to track farming things. In healthcare they use it. All kinds of practical applications. And yes, to make life better for people, not to take job. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is like super informative. I'm curious about this, this question of like socialist construction in China. You also feel, I feel like ultra leftists from the US often say, oh, China went capitalist with them, right? And like that's clearly bullshit because of, like you said, the party and the state plays a key role in disciplining capital and directing the economy. But I know that Xi Jinping and other leaders talk about like building China toward being modern, prosperous society as a necessary first step towards actually building socialism, and they've set 2030 as a goal for that. And I was wondering if you got any insight on your trip into like how they how the party and the leadership are thinking about taking that next step toward like realizing a socialist society, especially as we're approaching that 2030 goal that they set for build up productive socialism the economy.
Yeah, so it is a socialist society, and socialism itself is a transitional kind of phase, a process of development. But what did you said about, I could share with you, the main kind of central tasks of the party at any given time, just kind of map onto what are the biggest needs of the society, right? So eliminating absolute poverty, and then dealing with dealing with uneven development, mutual prosperity, this is, all of them are like super wide ranging projects. And I actually have a lot of, literature about that. Even Belt and Road is kind of a way to take the, uh, lifting up, and evening out of people, not just in China, but in the rest of the world that's been plundered by imperialism, and that to build up, the, to use the diplomacy speak, win-win cooperation, But yeah, I can share more, resources on those, so you can see in more detailed way, because it is very complicated, yeah.
I have a question about something that stood out in your presentation was like how someone could make a mutual aid request for care online and it would go through like that. Whereas if I were to do that here, it's yeah, I'm sorry, I'll do what I can, but I don't know how to help you.
Right, and even that here it's just people to people kind of sharing what they have, but that was a project, taken up actually by the state to collectively, develop the productive forces and just move things a lot faster. So yeah, way different than our idea of what.
Make a mutual aid request to your own state online.
Right, yeah, and then it gets answered, yeah.
Well, it's just the concept of mutual aid is it stems out of capitalism and an inherent inequality.
Right.
So it's not, because I feel like people don't understand when we talk about China, it's a completely different cultural reference, completely different, 5,000 years of history. It's a country of over 1 billion people with such a diverse population. And so, for example, your rent is proportional to your income. So if you lose your job, then your rent is $0. So when we say absolution, eradication of poverty, then you don't really need mutual aid requests in the way that you would need them here. So it's the mutual aid as a concept isn't really applicable in China.
But sustainable care, works networks through the state that actually work.
Yeah, 100%.
Sorry to,
Well, just seconds, too. Speaking of mutual aid, do you want to pass the?
Oh.
yeah, well, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that there are several cities that were awarded for their elder care. And my grandpa is in hospice in the moment, so I've been thinking a lot about how America treats its elderly. And how I think a lot of them unironically become right wing because Rush Limbaugh is the only person who talks to them. And so I was wondering how much you learned about elder care and hospice work and end of life care in China. If you saw much about it.
I didn't see much of that. Even our interaction with the all I know is they got an award for it. But in terms of the healthcare system, we did have someone on our delegation that got really sick. And he just walked into a hospital, obviously he doesn't have the health insurance that they all have. But he got a, what's it called? Checkup or exam, an x-ray, they found out he had a lung infection, so they prescribed antibiotics. And all of that, including and then took them and he got better and then went in for a final checkup. But all of that took about an hour. And it cost $50, including the medication.
One of the first things I learned about China that really kind of started changing my mind, and I think deprogramming me from what we learned about China was the basically elimination of the infant mortality rate. From the start of the revolution to now. Can you share a little bit about how the party has served women in China and anything you might have learned that we wouldn't know about here? And also how women have participated in the party as well.
Yeah, so this is kind of a good question too, because some people, looking at the, like the, central committee or some of these, it's like, it's not 50-50, right? But at all other, at other levels, it is, and it's also because it's a meritocracy and you can't, get like a high, position unless you've proven like decades of good work leading smaller regions or not. It's a product of, what the old society was and changing that. But women are all throughout the levels of the party and have, equal rights and this, so, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you.
Okay, yeah, so I guess like another thing that we see in the US, especially this week, is like how violent and repressive the police are in the United States. And I was wondering like what kind of interactions you saw, or like what was what was the presence of the police like in China?
So I didn't see too much police, but, as I described it, how governance works there, police, protect and serve is actually what they do. They investigate if people have problems, help to, help to solve things. I only saw police one time in Sion, and they were like, I guess, interviewing people after a car accident. And the one of the guys that was in that accident was like super mad. I don't know what happened, but he was getting up in the cop's face so bad. He was like he was about to fight him, and the cop was literally just standing there like just waiting for it to be over. It was like really striking. It was like that would you never see somebody acting like that to a police officer, and they're just patiently waiting for it to be over. You know what I mean? So yeah. Oh, also one of the things with about women's life for women, and that really shocked me was, catcalling is a big thing here, right? Never, you can walk down the street at 4 a.m, like no creepiness, no nothing, like they're just chill. That actually was really striking to me. Yeah.
I will say, I asked my daughter when we went to visit them there, I said, what's the level in Beijing of interpersonal violence? She laughed.
Yeah.
There's none. She said there's just none.
Very
If there were-
interesting.
I could just talk to people, if they couldn't speak English, I'd say, oh, sorry. But if they could, they could just chat. They were very friendly. And now Emily would always say, they're practicing their English, Mom. You'll be here for hours. And, I did have to kind of untangle myself sometimes, but, yeah, people, were just incredibly friendly,
Yeah.
and, I remember I was drinking a can of water or something, and there was a woman collecting, cans for recycling on the street. And, I finished it and I looked at her and I said, "You want it?" She just gave me this great big smile. It was so touching. I thought, oh,
Yeah.
I
No, yeah.
can,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, how the world is moving actually towards more peace. There's this sense, and China's leading that. There's a sense of like optimism in general. The kind of doom and gloom that permeates all levels of our culture here, I'm just like not there.
Did you guys get to go to any rural places in your time there?
Yeah, we did. So we passed through some. All of the cities in the Northwest, those are pretty rural areas. But actually, even on the train, like passing through and seeing, different, like what would be farming villages, it was so different than rural areas here. Like there's actually, tall buildings and things like that, even in the countryside. So yeah. Oh, yes.
So you said that education is, guaranteed up to, for 9 years, and then I'm curious what the education system looks like, after that, and, how has China done, I don't know, like, because as a national minority from the western part of China, say, I'm probably speaking, I probably now, have the same, like, opportunities to get into a competitive program in a university in Beijing if they have the, aptitude and interest, or is it, or, you know, is the, or is people who, or the people who already live in the, urban areas, dominate, because the cities are so large, you know? So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so I don't know too much. In too much detail about the education system, and there is like, wide ranging, free public education. And, obviously university is much more affordable and all of that. That's just that the 9 years is the guarantee, no matter where you are in the country, even in a remote village, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in terms of the ethnic minorities, because like the only way to have a society that's, equitable and peaceful with so many different national minorities and ethnic groups. There's a really big focus on, uplifting the culture and practices of ethnic minorities to other, Han Chinese that might not know about it, to kind of, fight any, chauvinist ideas or anything like that, but absolutely all people, no matter their, ethnicity, have the same, rights and access to any position or any school, yeah.
One of the narratives that we get a lot, I feel like in Western media about China, is this idea that it's a surveillance state and being watched everywhere, even though I think I read somewhere in the US that's more security cameras per capita that's like privately owned. But like, you showed that slide photo you took of the thing that scanned your face at the airport. If I encounter that, I mean, I already encountered that sort of thing at the airport here, and I have like a hate thing that had my face, but like it seems like kind of similar to the question about AI, like it seems like it serves a different goal there, where it's being deployed in service of people and people have much higher trust in their government. And I was wondering if you had conversations or had any insights about like how people relate to this idea of like surveillance, and the use of technology for quote unquote surveillance, and how that's different and how that's like seen here, ideally.
Yeah, I mean, people think nothing of it. Like the thing is that there's an idea that the government, the government and the laws are to keep people safe, and to ensure the smooth functioning of things. So, and I didn't notice any, weird cameras or whatever. Yeah, at the airport, there's that. And obviously national security is a big deal, especially when you have, the context of the imperialists wanting to break apart China still, and, stoke wars and that. But I didn't really even notice that as a vibe there. It's very, you can go and do whatever.
More?
Oh, I did read a thing this week online that China has, for the first time, sanctioned two banks in Lithuania, two state banks, because as affiliates of NATO, they have to participate in a sanctioning of some Chinese banks because NATO did that. And that this has never happened before in history, that China has done this to Western countries. And that it's speculated that they started with Lithuania because they're smaller, don't have as much power. They're gonna see what the West does, in reaction to this. And maybe this will be the beginning of China sanctioning Western enterprises more. They said that this is a big deal.
No, I think that would be great if they do that. Yeah, there's just because of the success of all of these things, and also the really, positive, international kind of relationships with, especially, in Africa, but also in a lot of, Eastern European, countries. There's just kind of a growing kind of, sense of confidence about the future too. Like even we went to a dialogue at Fudan University where there were like some Marxist professors in that, and someone brought up the narratives about Xinjiang and Uyghur genocide and that, and asked like, what is your kind of response? What's China's kind of response to that at this point? And the professor literally said, "We don't care." It's like they can say whatever they want. It's working. It's moving in such a positive direction that you know what's being built will outlast empires.
Yeah, so I know you're mentioning seeing one person and like throughout your journey that it seemed like there was maybe like enhanced responsibility on family members to like take care of people who are struggling, and that there's like some sort of interrogation as to what failed this person. I guess I was curious if that's more of like a legal or cultural onus on family to take care of people who are following contract.
Probably, but I think that's just kind of one example of it would be a whole investigation of how they got to where they are. And like, yeah, if they had a family member that had the ability and should have taken them in and didn't, then that's a problem. But it was more so that the responsibility is on the the city and like province level government to figure out what happened. I mean, even this, like I said, the whole process of fixing the issue of people going into the cities to beg, which was years ago was a much bigger problem, but there was a lot of different ways to tackle that, and there was even like a program where, okay, we're doing this development in the countryside, but also you can't do that. You can't just go from where you are and go into the city with no ability to make money, da, da, da. And so they would send the people back to their village or where they were from, basically deport them, right? And there was one situation where they mind you one situation where someone was accidentally deported to a village that he wasn't from. And people were really angry about that. And so they canceled that that program and just doubled down on jobs and infrastructure in the countryside to keep people there. Yeah. But yeah, just an example of how like, of course, things go, like I said, it's not a utopia, but there's actually the way that socialist democracy functions, there's a way to address contradictions and fix things.
Just one more. I had you talked about how like the poverty alleviation programs, like they would oftentimes go to like rural areas and say like, oh, you can't like sell your vegetables or your farm products. Let's build you a bridge. Let's build you a road or something like that. Can you talk about how like that mimics like often their like foreign policy and diplomacy with other countries, and if there's anything interesting you learned about how they work with other countries that they trade with?
Yeah, no, you can tell in the 10 years of Dolphin Road how a lot of these processes of how they actually find these routes out of poverty and find these mechanisms for sustainable development and can export that and work with other countries in the same way to solve the problems. Even like they're gonna have a multinational summit in the Maldives with China. Oh, there's no way to get from island to island. Okay, we'll build land bridges between the islands just so that you can host the summit there, like this kind of thing. Yeah, and also like it's just so detailed and so responsive to what people want and need. There's even situations where like there's this one village I saw where they part of the development was like people all had washing machines so they could do their laundry, but the villagers, lifestyle of in the countryside is much different. And especially the older people, they didn't like using the washing machines because they all used to get together and chat while they were doing the clothes. So they built instead this like kind of it was like a laundry system where they can all go together as if they were in the river, but it has like drains and soap and stuff, so they can still do laundry in the old way, but still have clean water in that. Yeah. Yeah.
Could I add one piece that I think would be really helpful for a lot of Americans to understand China and everything you've been talking about?
Yeah, of course.
A cultural perspective. The culture in China is very collectivist, so the earlier question of is it as a is it a more cultural thing or like expectation of family to take care of each other? I think a lot of it like operates under the underlying collectivist culture of like, yeah, you make personal sacrifices for the benefit of everyone else and like the greater good. And that's where you see a lot of these like that culture influencing the policy and the processes in that too. Whereas in the United States, we would like just kind of reduce that to quote unquote nationalism, but whatever they would consider like patriotism is a form of that collectiveness and like solidarity and holistic understanding. So I just think like Americans should do that. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, very point.
Let's hear it for Sid.
One more thing, if everybody's so skeptical, if anybody's skeptical, like, oh, this is just what the party told you, what about the secrets of China? Well, I have it right here. Yeah, they gave me the secrets, guys.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. If there's pizza left, either eat it or take some home, make sure it's all gone, okay? Thanks, everybody, for coming. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.